It's Spain. It's Germany. It's Japan. And it's Costa Rica. It's Group E. And it's the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar. It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. We are doing a group-by-group preview in this series. And this podcast is looking at Group E, made up of Spain, Germany, Japan, and Costa Rica.
That's right, and this series will be followed by our next one, which is a team-by-team look at their players. And then shortly before the Cup, we'll be doing another podcast series with final updates on both teams and players.
So this series features a deep dive into the World Cup finals history of the teams. For a deeper dive still, you can check out any of the 9 podcast series we have done so far, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the podcast.
Right, so let's look at the 3 sections that we'll cover in the podcast.
So with part 1, we begin with a look at who is in the group, which pot they came from, their colors and nickname, and some geographical information about each country, comparing how big each country is in relation to the others in the group.
Right, and part 2 is the longest section. That's a team-by-team overview with a quick review of their participation and major achievements, an overview of their World and Regional Cup history, and as promised for this series, a deep dive into their World Cup finals history. And then we'll give particular attention to their recent tournaments and games.
And we end with part 3, which is a summary of each team and a sense of their current form as we lead into a comparison of the teams through their FIFA and ELO rankings, head-to-head meetings, and the odds on their success. That will launch us into a discussion of their prospects and our predictions.
All right. And at the end, we will again provide our address and the links so that those who want to delve into more history on the teams can check out the previous podcasts. There is, by the way, a YouTube version of this and a podcast version. They're actually the same broadcast, but the YouTube version has simple graphics to follow along while watching and listening. And there's also information that can be found in the show notes, such as the times that we're spending on each section here. All right. Well, before we begin, do you have a thematic shirt, Connor?
I do. I'm wearing a Germany shirt, kind of unrecognizable because it's their green strip, which I don't think they use much nowadays. I think this one is from 2002, so it goes back a while.
Okay, and I don't even know where mine is from, but it's also a Germany shirt, and the green, not that we're profound green Germany fans. Well, you're more of a fan, I think, than I am.
Well, I do have some German blood in me, so I will come clean with that right at the start here.
All right. Well, in my case, it's more just the fact that I have a Germany shirt and I don't have any of the other ones, so I'll have to do something about that. All right. Well, let's begin with part 1 and an introduction of each team.
All right. So the pot 1 team here is Spain. We have 2 teams that are traditionally pot 1 teams, but Spain is a top-seeded team in this group. Their nickname is La Roja, the red one, or La Furia Roja, or the Red Fury. And they have a red kit, usually with a bit of yellow and blue highlighting.
Right, that's right. And where do they come from in pot 1 among the 8 teams there?
Yeah, so they actually come from near the bottom of pot 1. They were 7th overall at the time. 7th overall in the world according to the FIFA rankings at the time of the draw. So that puts them at the second bottom team from pot 1.
All right, moving on to Germany.
Germany is known as Die Nationalelf, which is the National 11, or Die Mannschaft, the team. Germany, of course, wears their famous white kits with black, kind of black on the collars and sleeves. Germany is a pot 2 team, and they actually come from the middle of pot 2, perhaps a bit surprising. They were 12th in FIFA rankings at the time of this draw.
All right. Well, we'll talk about why that is, because as you said, they're typically a pot one team. Moving on to Japan.
All right, so Japan, they're known as the Samurai Blue or Osim Japan. Um, Japan, they have the white and red flag, but they wear blue as their national color. And Japan come from actually kind of near the top of pot three. They were the third ranked team in pot three at 23rd in the world at the time of the draw.
All right. And finally, we have Costa Rica.
Yeah, Costa Rica, they wear red and blue, and the nickname is Los Ticos. And Costa Rica are actually ranked 31st in the world. That actually would have been good enough for pot three, except they came in through the intercontinental playoffs. So they were kind of automatically assigned to pot four. So they are a pot four team, but I guess strictly based on rankings, they'd either be kind of bottom of pot three or bottom of pot four, depending if you're including kind of all the playoff teams.
That's right. Did we cover their nickname and kit?
Yes, we
Okay.
did.
Sorry about that. I must have tuned out a bit. Okay, let's take a look at the geography, beginning with Spain. Where in the world is Spain?
So Spain is a large country on the Iberian Peninsula in southwestern Europe. Spain is a fairly large country at about 500,000 square kilometers. That ranks 10th among all World Cup teams in terms of geographical size. And a population of 48 million also ranks them 10th among the 32 teams in the World Cup.
Okay, moving on to Germany.
Germany is a large country in Central Europe. They're smaller than Spain, though, by about 150,000 square kilometers, or about 25% smaller. They're 350,000 square kilometers. That ranks 14th among all World Cup teams. But their population of 84 million is much larger than Spain's, and that ranks 6th among all World Cup teams.
Okay, well, let's take a look at Japan.
All right, Japan is an island country to the east of Asia. Japan, at 377,000 square kilometers, is actually slightly larger than Germany, which again is a bit of a surprise to me. And it ranks 13th amongst World Cup countries. And it's got a massive population, 125 million. That is 4th overall.
All right. So actually pretty comparable there with Germany. And finally, Costa Rica.
Yeah, well, we had three kind of largest countries, and then Costa Rica is tiny, just 51,000 square kilometers. That's 10% of the size of Spain.
Wow.
Of course, has a colonial link there as well. And a population of just 5.2 million. That's the 5th smallest country, or 28th overall among all World Cup teams. So a small country kind of by both measures.
All right. Well, Connor did some comparisons as we went there, but let's just take a look at a final comparison, kind of putting them all together there.
Yeah, focusing on population, we have Japan at 125 million people, Germany at 84 million, Spain at 48 million, so about kind of just under half of what Germany is, or just over half of Germany's population, but it is the largest country geographically. And then we have tiny Costa Rica, 5.2 million, the smallest country in the group.
Right. Okay. Central America represented. All right. Well, let's jump into part 2 then. That is a team-by-team look with a focus on World Cup finals. So we'll begin with an overview of Spain and their participation and achievements. So Spain played their first international game in 1920, but they didn't enter the first World Cup in 1930. They also didn't enter in 1938 due to civil war in their country. They participated consistently otherwise, though. Their first Euro was their only non-completion of that tournament. Their right-wing leader, Franco, refused to play the Soviet Union there, and they were disqualified.
Interesting. In terms of achievement, Spain's only real success before their 2008 Euro Cup win came in the early years of both Cups, finishing 4th in the World Cup in 1950 and winning the Euro Cup in 1964 when they hosted. Their claim to fame, though, was a dominant period, a dynasty, given that the team didn't change much. From 2008 to 2012, where they won 3 tournaments in a row, the 2008 and 2012 Euro Cups, along with the 2010 World Cup, a feat no other team has achieved.
All right, well, we will get into that with the deep dive, but let's begin with just a World Cup overview. So, as mentioned, they didn't enter 2 of the first 3 cups, and they reached the quarterfinal in the one they participated in, which is 1934 in Italy. After the war, they looked a strong team, taking 4th place in Brazil 1950. However, they were poor after that, missing the next 2 cups. Indeed, they missed 4 of the next 7 cups from 1954 to 1978 and were knocked out in the group stage of the other 3. Only from 1982, when they hosted, did they become a strong team, not only qualifying for every tournament, but usually passing the group stage. Only in 1988 and 2014 did they fail to do so. The second of these was a bit of a lapse after winning the previous cup. Ironically, that lapse in 2014 was in Brazil, where they had enjoyed their biggest success of the early years. Okay, well, let's move on to the deep dive into the World Cup. So we've divided this into 5 parts, and part 1 of 5 covers 1930 to 1950. So perhaps the distance in traveling to Uruguay for the first cup in 1930 is the reason they didn't enter. If so, they were lucky that the second cup was in nearby Italy. That tournament was structured much as the finals are now, a knockout-style tournament beginning with the round of 16. They began their finals career with a 3-1 win over Brazil, and they faced host Italy in the quarterfinals, and the games were played in intense heat. I say games in the plural there because the first meeting was a 1-1 draw, and it was unresolved by extra time. So the practice at the time was to replay the game in order to determine a winner. The game, and especially its replay the following day, are famous for their brutality and partial refereeing. Italians chopped down the Spanish, but the Swiss referee, I'm giving his name here because it's a bit significant, Merced, overlooked all of these fouls, and he also disallowed 2 Spanish goals in the second half. One because a Spanish player was fouled. No, he disallowed a goal because a Spanish player was fouled. Italy won 1-0 on a first half goal. This is the second game, and that referee, Merced, was later banned from refereeing in Switzerland. On to 1950 in Brazil, and their first opponent was USA. The USA would earn a famous 1-0 win over England later in this cup, but they almost did the same thing to Spain. Spain, though, scored 3 goals over the last 9 minutes to win 3-1. Spain beat Chile in the next game and scored the only goal of the third game at 48 to complete England's embarrassment. England having entered the tournaments as giants and heavy favourites, but surprised by the USA and then finished off by Spain. 3 wins in the groups brought Spain to a second group stage. There they tied the eventual champions Uruguay in the first match, but they lost heavily to host Brazil in their second. The last game of the group was the de facto third place match, since neither had a chance of taking first or second. It was against Sweden, and the Swedes won 3-1, and it was a 4th place finish for Spain. All right, part 2 covers 1958 to 1978. Connor?
All right, so Spain missed the next 2 cups after 1950, but qualified for Chile 1962. They lost to Czechoslovakia on the only goal of the game at 80 minutes, but won the second game over Mexico the same way, that goal coming at 90. They led Brazil in the third game until Brazil's Amarildo, the replacement for an injured Pelé, scored 2 late goals to leave Spain last in the group stage. 1966 opened with a 1-2 loss to Argentina. Spain beat Switzerland by the same score, coming back from a goal down in the second half. It was also 2-1 against West Germany, but they were on the losing side of that score and finished third in the group stage. They failed to reach the 2 cups after that, making it a long, weak period. That continued into Argentina in 1978, though they did reach the cup. However, they only managed third place in the group and did not advance.
All right, well, that was a week period. We move into part 3 of 5, 1982 to 1998. Perhaps hosting the Cup in 1982 would yield a better result for Spain. It didn't start promisingly, though, as the hosts only managed a draw with debutants Honduras. Honduras got an early goal at 7, and Spain's equaliser at 65 was on a questionable penalty. Reffing also seemed to be on their side in their 2-1 win over Yugoslavia, where they benefited from a generous penalty. Northern Ireland scored against them at 47 in the third game, but they were given a harsh red card at 60. Spain couldn't find an equaliser, though, and lost that game. They finished tied on points and on goal difference with Yugoslavia, but advanced in second on the basis of scoring one more goal. They advanced to a second stage group made up of 3 teams. There they lost to West Germany in the first match and tied England scoreless in the second for a third place finish. It wasn't a good tournament as hosts, very nearly becoming the first hosts knocked out at the group stage. However, it did initiate an era of greater success as they reached all cups after this and rarely fell at the group stage. 1986 Mexico began with a loss to Brazil, but they beat Northern Ireland, who had dismissed them from the 1966 Cup. A win over Algeria saw them through in second place. Belgium proved tough in the quarterfinals, scoring at 35 and holding the lead for most of the game. Spain equalized at 85, though, but it went to penalties, and there they lost. In 1990, Italy, they opened with a tie against Uruguay, but took first place in the group with wins over South Korea and Belgium. Spain met Yugoslavia in a match that went to extra time. Yugoslavia hit quickly at 92 and held on to knock out Spain in their second quarterfinal loss in a row. It would be 3 in a row after 1994 was all settled. That was in the USA, and their first game against South Korea seemed an easy win, especially after scoring 2 quick goals in the second half. The Asians staged an impressive comeback, though, with 2 late goals at 85 and 90, perhaps aided by a red card to Spain earlier in the game at 26. A draw with Germany in Game 2 was better. Bolivia seemed another easy opponent in Game 3, and this time it proved so. They beat them to finish second in the group. A 3-0 win over Switzerland in the round of 16 was convincing, but they faced defending champions Italy in the quarterfinal, where Roberto Baggio put them to the sword with a late winning goal at 88. All right, part 4 of 5. Actually, that's the one that covers 1998, and it goes to 2008.
Yeah, so France 1998 was a disappointment. It started with a loss to Nigeria. A goalless draw with Paraguay followed, and a 6-1 thrashing of Bulgaria in the last game actually didn't help as they finished third in the group stage. 2002 was much better. 3 group stage wins over Slovenia, Paraguay, and South Africa saw them through in first place. They faced Ireland in the round of 16 and looked to win on a single goal at 8 minutes until Ireland equalized with a penalty at 90. Spain won on a low-scoring penalty shootout where 5 of the 9 shots were missed.
I was there.
Oh, that was for the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
With host South Korea. The Koreans held Spain goalless through 120 minutes and beat them on penalties. After the game, Spain complained about refereeing decisions, citing especially one disallowed goal due to the linesman blowing down a play because the ball had gone over the goal line. Though the ball does not appear to go fully over the line in the replay, it was actually slide to call it a disallowed goal since the Korean players had stopped playing at the whistle. Some teams, in fact, tended to make it practice to bias the situation by putting the ball in the net and refer to it as a disallowed goal. Likely for this reason, the 2006 World Cup had yellow cards for players who continued the play and put the ball in the net after a play is whistled down.
All right, I had a little story here, Connor. So
All right.
there we were in the stadium for the Spain game, and it was great to watch. After the game, actually, your dad was with me. He had come to Korea to watch a couple of games, taking advantage of the fact that I live there. So after the game, we took a train to Seoul and headed for the airport, and it was my brother's last day in the country. Um, we got lost in the back. Oh, we got lost in the back hallways of the airport, and we found a stairwell and went down and through a door that said "Don't go through this door," and found the Korean team was eating at the cafeteria. So we were politely escorted out through a set of doors, and as soon as we opened the doors, we faced cheers from the mobs of fans waiting who thought their heroes were emerging. It was just us.
That's hilarious. 2006 in Germany again saw Spain win all group stage games. It was an easy group where they beat Ukraine, Tunisia, and Saudi Arabia. In the round of 16 game with France, they went up on a penalty at 28 minutes, but it lost 1-3. France scoring the winning goal at 83 minutes and adding another in injury time. So another relatively quick exit for Spain.
That's right. But now we move on to part five of five. That's 2010 to 2014. And they went with great hope in South Africa, into South Africa 2010, having won the 2008 Euro Cup. It started with a loss to Switzerland to dampen their enthusiasm, but they beat Honduras and Chile to advance in first. 1-0 wins over Portugal, Paraguay, and then Germany saw them through to the final. The quarterfinal of these was the most dramatic. Paraguay suffered a disallowed goal that was valid in the first half, and both teams missed penalties in the second. Spain finally broke through at 83 to score the winner. And the final with the Netherlands was also bereft of goals, but it didn't lack yellow cards. 14 of them were handed out. It was rough rather than dirty. Rough rather than dirty. Two of Netherlands' 9 yellow cards eventually added up to a red card at 109 in extra time. Spain dominated while Netherlands had the more dangerous chances on 2 breaks. But the winner was scored at 116. Do you remember who, Connor?
I think it was Iniesta. Is that right?
It was Andres Iniesta. All right. Well, Spain also won the 2012 Euro Cup, and it was a dynasty generation going into the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. It couldn't have gone worse, though. By chance, the first game of the group stage was a replay of the previous finals, but they were humiliated 1-5 by the Netherlands. A loss in the next game to Chile's best generation meant that they were the first team knocked out of the cup, and a 3-0 win over Australia in the third game made no difference. All right, well, that's the end of the deep dive, or kind of, because we are going to take a closer look at 2018 and the qualifying for 2022.
Yeah, so starting with 2018, Spain had a commanding qualification, although it was an easy group. They bested Italy, the only tough opponent, and they otherwise won all games over Italy, Albania, Macedonia, and Liechtenstein. They were still a good team in 2018, with several of their dynasty generation remaining. And they opened the World Cup finals with a tie against 2016 Euro Cup winners Portugal. A thrilling 3-3 draw where superstar Ronaldo completed a hat trick with a tremendous free kick 2 minutes from time. A 1-0 win over Iran made passage seem likely given they faced Morocco in their third match. But Morocco proved tougher than expected, as Iran had, and it was only a 2-2 draw. Nevertheless, enough to see them through in first. They were paired with Russia, the host country, in the round of 16, but as in 2002, they lost on penalties to the host country. So surprising early exit for Spain there.
All right. Well, yeah, that wasn't great. Let's see how they looked in 2022 World Cup qualifying.
So Spain tied at home to Greece in their opener and lost in Sweden, but otherwise won all games. They proved much more consistent than Sweden, to finish first in the qualifying group. So no troubles getting here.
Yeah, they needed a couple of late goals to get a couple of wins there, but a pretty solid performance, as Spain usually does. Okay, well, that moves us on to the Euro Cup history, or the Regional Cup history. So we'll take just an overview of that. And in the Euro Cup, as I mentioned, they were disqualified in 1960 after refusing to travel to the USSR for a qualifying game. But they won as host in 1964, ironically beating the USSR in the final. They failed to reach the next three cups after that, matching their indifferent World Cup record during this period. From 1980, they reached all tournaments except for 1992. Second place in 1984 was good, but it was surrounded by two knockouts at the group stage and two non-qualifications further beyond that. From 1996, they reached beyond the group stage every time except for 2004. That lapse, however, was followed by two titles in 2008 and 2012, with their World Cup win in 2010 making it a dynasty generation. Following the crash of that period in the 2014 Brazil World Cup, they recovered somewhat with a round of 16 finish in 2016, and we saw that they achieved the same result in the 2018 World Cup. So let's see if they recovered any further in the 2020 Euro Cup.
So just beginning with a look at qualifying, Spain finished a clear first in their qualifying group, suffering only draws away with second place Sweden and third place Norway, but winning all games against Romania, Faroe Islands, and Malta. In the tournament, Spain tied Sweden and Poland, but beat Slovakia heavily to finish second in the group stage, behind Sweden, who they met in qualifying. Despite dominating, Croatia scored two late goals to force extra time in the round of 16, but Spain scored twice to avoid penalties. It did, however, go to penalties with Switzerland in the quarterfinals, where they won, and Italy in the semifinals, which they lost.
All right. Well, a semi-final finish, pretty good there. Gives them a bit more hope in this cup. And we're going to do one more section here, just recent and upcoming games. They have been playing UEFA Nations League games. They're kind of in the middle of that right now. Connor, how have they been doing?
Yeah, so they had some games in October 2021, which was actually the final of the 2020-2021 UEFA Nations League. And Spain won. They lost to France and then beat Italy to claim third. Then a couple friendlies after that, wins against Albania and Iceland. But more significantly, their most recent games were in UEFA Nations League A play. They tied Portugal in their first game and then tied Czech Republic, but followed that up with wins against Switzerland and Czech Republic, who they met a second time. So they're in a good situation with 2 games left.
Yeah, fairly good there. All right, well, let's close up with the World Cup schedule, which we might discuss in the final section if we feel the order of games is significant.
So Spain opened up against Costa Rica. They then meet Germany, kind of a heavyweight clash in their second match, and then they finish playing Japan.
All right, well, all eyes will be on that second game, I'm sure. All right, that brings us to the end of Spain, and we will go to Germany next, beginning with their tournament participation and major achievements. So Germany withdrew from the first World Cup in 1930, and they were banned in 1950 due to their role in World War II. Otherwise, they've entered every cup. They didn't enter the first 2 Euro Cups in 1960 and 1964, but have joined continuously since.
Yeah, by many accounts, Germany is the second best team in the world behind Brazil. They have won the World Cup 4 times and have reached the final 8 times.
Wow.
Up until recently, they have never failed to pass a qualification campaign. Their regional record is not as impressive in the details, For instance, they do have one failed qualifying campaign here. However, the final results are equally impressive with 3 Euro Cup titles and 6 appearances in the final.
All right. Well, a very successful country. And we will jump into a World Cup overview before doing our deep dive. So it was actually a weak start in World Cup play, withdrawing in 1930 and being banned in 1950. From then until 2008, though, they not only qualified for all cups, but went past the group stage every time, the latter a record that not even Brazil can boast. Surprisingly, the only time they had not passed the group stage was in 1938, at the height of their Nazi political power. Had they won in 1994 rather than 1990, their wins would be like clockwork every 20 years. As it is, the mid-90s proved a relatively weak period, reaching only the quarterfinal twice in a row in 1994 and 1998. Outside of those years, they finished in the top 3 every time from 1982 to 2014. Perhaps bigger than winning the Cup in 2014, though, was their thrashing of their biggest rival, Brazil, who was hosting by a score of, Connor?
Oh, 7-1.
Wow. This, together with Brazil's failure to win since 2002, argue for Germany being the best soccer country. That puts into perspective the magnitude of and the humiliation at being knocked out at the group stage of the 2018 World Cup at the hands of relative minnows South Korea. Actually, we should have saved that for the for a bit later, but there we go. We've given away the plot. All right. Well, we've divided Germany also into 5 parts. So part 1 of 5 deals with 1930 to 1950. So let's go. Germany withdrew from the first World Cup, like many European teams, perhaps unwilling to make the long trip to Uruguay by boat. 1934 Italy was thus their first cup, and as we've mentioned, it was structured as a knockout competition from a round of 16. So in their first round, they beat Belgium 5-2, and they followed that with a 2-1 win over Sweden in the quarterfinals. In the semifinals, they lost to an impressive Czechoslovakia 0-3, but they took third place with a 3-2 win over Austria. The Nazi government had actually stripped the strong Austrian team of its best players for the 1938 World Cup. Austria's best player, Matthias Sindelar, was, in quotes, invited to join the German team, but he had refused. Sometime later, it was announced that he had committed suicide, but suspicions remain about what really happened. Ultimately, though, it didn't help the Nazi regime, and the cup proved a blow to their self-superiority as they fell to Switzerland in the first round, the round of 16. The initial game finished tied after extra time, and it had to be resolved through a replay. Germany got off to a good start, but Switzerland recovered. Actually, a stunning comeback with 3 second-half goals by the Swiss, and the Germans were unable to recover from that. All right, part 2 of 5 covers 1954 to 1970. Take it away, Connor.
So 1954, when the Cup was in Switzerland, marked their first win. Amazingly, they were managed by Sepp Herberger, who had been their manager in 1938 and who would continue in the role all the way to 1964.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And especially kind of coming in the Nazi era to survive that.
That's right, and through the war and everything.
Yeah. The tournament started with beating Turkey in the opening game. They faced Hungary in the next game. Hungary, by far the best team in the world, and proving so, as Sander Koskis led the way in their 8-3 thrashing of Germany.
Oof.
The oddly structured tournament did not see them playing South Korea, the weakest member of that group. And because they finished tied on points with Turkey, a tie-breaking game was a decider. So they actually played Turkey twice, and group mates Korea not at all. Germany won the tiebreaker 7-2 and advanced to the quarterfinals. They beat Yugoslavia 2-0 there and Austria 6-1 to find themselves in the final again, facing the mighty Hungary, who, as I mentioned, won 8-3 earlier in the group. Hungary went ahead 2-0 after just 8 minutes, but the Germans pulled back to 2-2 but 10 minutes later.
Wow.
The rain affected the game, and German captain Fritz Walter allegedly played his best in the rain. But Germany was further and perhaps more significantly aided in the wet by their new Adidas boots, which featured screw-in studs. So that's a big advantage in wet conditions.
Mm-hmm.
There were no goals between 18 and 84 minutes, though many Hungarian misses. Germany scored again at 84 minutes, and a tying goal by Hungary was controversially disallowed 2 minutes before the end by the English referee. The Miracle of Bern is what this famous game was called. A huge upset that earned Germany their first title.
Right. Maybe they should call it the Miracle of Adidas.
Yeah, absolutely. And a bit of weather on their side too.
Right.
1958 in Sweden saw Germany facing the mysterious Argentina in their opener. Argentina had withdrawn from 3 cups from 1938 to 1954, but were in dominant form in South America. They proved worrisome by scoring at just 2 minutes, but in the end, Germany beat them 3-1 and secured their passage with draws against Czechoslovakia and Northern Ireland. A win over Yugoslavia brought them to the semifinal against host Sweden. This was a very rough affair. The game was tied 1-1 from the 32nd mark until Sweden scored at 81 and again at 88. That sent Germany to the third place match and suffered a 3-6 loss to France to finish fourth. French hero Just Fontaine scoring 4 of the goals.
Okay, just a quick correction there. It wasn't 1-1 at the 32nd mark, but at the 32-minute mark.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That would have been a good game, hey?
Yeah. Sorry, 32nd minute.
Yeah, no problem.
1962 started with the draw against Italy and wins over Switzerland and host Chile. They once again faced Yugoslavia in the quarterfinals, and as in the previous cup, it was a 1-0 game. However, it was Germany who came out the losers this time, and they were out of the cup after a very promising group stage. The cup was in England in 1966, and Germany opened with a 5-0 win over Switzerland, 2 goals scored by a young Franz Beckenbauer. It was a draw with Argentina and a win over Spain to take first over Argentina on goal difference. Germany comfortably won their quarterfinal game with Uruguay, who received red cards at 49 and 54 minutes.
Yikes.
Germany then beat USSR 2-1 to reach the final, which was a classic against host country England. England looked set to win on a goal at 78 minutes, but Germany got a late equalizer a minute from time and forced the game into extra time. At 101 minutes, England's Geoff Hurst took a shot which hit the underside of the crossbar and went straight down, then bounced back out. That the referee awarded it was very controversial. Recent video analysis suggests it wasn't a goal, though it's really impossible to tell with the naked eye. And there would be an odd echo of this in 2010 when the same thing happened to England, but a goal was not given. Geoff Hurst scored again at 120 minutes to earn a hat trick, the only one ever in a final. So England beating Germany 4-2 in that match.
Right.
On to 1970 in Mexico, and Germany won all group stage games over Morocco, Bulgaria, and Peru. Gerd Müller scoring hat tricks in each of the last 2 games.
Holy smokes.
The quarterfinal featured a rematch of the 1966 final. England was up 2-0, but Germany came back, then won in extra time with Gerd Müller scoring at 108 minutes. The semifinal with Italy is dubbed the game of the century. It certainly wasn't for most of the game, as Italy scored early and then sat on the lead in their famous, though perhaps dull, defensive Catenaccio style. Germany defied it, though, scoring at 90 minutes to send the game to extra time, which was tremendous. The Germans scored again at 95 minutes, but Italy struck at 98 and 103 to lead. It was Germany at 110 then Italy at 112 to win.
Wow.
5 goals had been scored in the space of 17 extra time minutes. Gerd Muller scored both extra time goals and ended the tournament with 10 and the Golden Boot. But it sent Germany to a third place match. He wasn't on the score sheet, but Germany did win 1-0 over Uruguay to earn third place.
All right. Well, that's a long history, but that's Germany for you. We move on to part 3 of 5, which covered 1974 to 1986. So in 1974, Germany hosted. They beat Chile and Australia in the group stage, and the third game was not important. As both West and East Germany had secured passage. But of course, it was of prime importance in terms of posturing in the Cold War, with nothing less than the superiority of capitalism versus communism on the line. Refreshingly, though, the players didn't view it that way and they treated it just as a game. East Germany won 1-0, but the politics raged as West Germany lost the battle but won the war by becoming champions. They did so convincingly, winning all games in the second group stage over Yugoslavia, Sweden, and Poland. That took them to the final with Netherlands, who scored 90 seconds in on a penalty before Germany had even touched the ball. That was Netherlands' total attack philosophy. Germany equalised on their own penalty, though, and Gerd Müller scored what turned out to be the winner at 43. With no goals in the second half, Germany had their second title. 1978 Austria saw 0-0 draws with Poland and Tunisia, sandwiching a 6-0 win over Mexico. Another goalless draw with Italy started the second group stage, and it was followed by a rematch of the previous final with Netherlands. That was a tense match where Netherlands scored late to earn a 2-2 draw. Austria also got a late goal in the third match to win and drag West Germany into the bottom half of the table as Netherlands and Italy advanced from the group.
I will just make a correction. You mentioned 1978 Austria, but it was Argentina the hosts.
Yes.
Germany met Austria decisively in that tournament.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. All right. Well, 1982, Spain began with a loss to Algeria. They beat Chile in game 2, and the situation was such in the third game that if Austria lost to Germany by a small margin, both of them would qualify. But if Austria lost by a large margin, Algeria would advance ahead of Austria. After 11 minutes of furious attack, the Germans scored. Then both teams seemed to agree to kick the ball around aimlessly for the next 80 minutes. West Germany was perhaps happy to exact revenge on Algeria, having lost to them in the opening game. This, of course, earned the wrath of Algerian fans, but host Spain too was angry. In fact, German and Austrian fans who had come to watch a rematch of Austria's 1978 defeat of West Germany were also angry. The debacle led to simultaneous third matches from the next World Cup on. Germany advanced to play England in the second stage of second group stage made up of 3 teams. It was 0-0 draw with England, and Germany beat knocked out host Spain in the second game. They advanced to an all-time classic with France in the semi-final. Regular time in that game ended at 1-1, but it included a ferocious foul by German keeper Schumacher, knocking an attacker in on a breakaway unconscious and knocking out 2 of his teeth. And what's more, he went unpunished. France also thundered a shot off the crossbar in the closing minutes, just a couple of the dramatic events in that game. In extra time, France went up 3-1 by 98 minutes, but Germany impressively came back. It went to penalties and Schumacher saved 2 of them, securing the victory for Germany. The final was anticlimactic by comparison. The game went scoreless until Italy scored at 57 and went on to win 3-1, Germany scoring the last of the goals. 1986 Mexico saw Germany tie Uruguay, beat Scotland, and lose to Denmark. for a second place finish in the group stage. The round of 16 game went scoreless with Morocco until Germany won on a late goal at 87. The quarterfinal with host Mexico was closer still, going goalless to penalties, where Schumacher saved the second and third to win. Germany gaining an increasingly good reputation for penalty shootouts as time went. The promise of a grudge match with France followed, but it was not the thriller of the previous Cup semi-final, and Germany won 2-0. And they advanced to meet Argentina in the final. Argentina went up 2-0 early in the second half, but Germany were level by 80. However, Argentina scored at 83 to win, Germany finishing runners-up for the second Cup in a row. On to part 4 of 5, which covers 1990 to 2002.
1990 began with heavy wins over Yugoslavia and United Arab Emirates before Germany tied Colombia in their third match. Wins over Netherlands and Czechoslovakia brought them to a semi-final match with England. It ended 1-1 and went to penalties, Germany predictably winning. Germany found themselves in the final with Argentina as in the previous Cup, and it was considered one of the ugliest World Cup games ever. There were several questionable penalty decisions, denying at least one clear penalty to each team. Argentina received 2 red cards, and these were the first red cards ever shown in a final. The final penalty, awarded 6 minutes before the end of time, was also highly controversial. Germany scored and won the game 1-0, and the scene after the game was chaos, but Germany had won their third title. 1994 USA saw an easy group stage. A win over Bolivia and a draw with Spain led them to their third game, where they went 3-0 up on South Korea by halftime. The Koreans made a valiant effort and scored twice in the second half, but Germany advanced in first place. It would actually not be the last time South Korea caused Germany trouble. The round of 16 began excitingly with 3 goals in the first 11 minutes between themselves and Belgium. Germany went on to win 3-2. The quarterfinals seemed a generous matching with Bulgaria, but tournament star Hristo Stoichkov led Bulgaria back from a goal down to knock Germany out. 1998 in France saw Germany finish first in the group stage and then beat Mexico in the round of 16, coming back from a goal down to win. They also went a goal down to Croatia in the quarterfinals, and 2 goals in the middle of the second half decided the matter. But these 2 were also Croatian goals, and Germany was knocked out with a 0-3 loss. The 2002 World Cup in South Korea and Japan started with an 8-0 trouncing of Saudi Arabia. For the third cup in a row, Germany tied the middle game of the group stage, Ireland getting an injury time goal to steal a point. A win over Cameroon once again saw them advance in first. It was 1-0 wins all the way to the final, the goal against Paraguay in the round of 16 coming just 2 minutes from time. Germany got away with a handball on the line in an exciting game with the USA. And I think, Kev, you were there watching from the stands.
I think I was there too, but my total number of World Cup games doesn't seem to match how many tickets I had. But I'm pretty sure we attended to that. I have to talk to your brother. It was in Ulsan.
Yeah. Anyway, so Germany got onto the semifinals, and like other European teams, Germany struggled with the feisty but now tired South Koreans, and Germany won on a single goal at 75 minutes to knock the hosts out.
Ouch.
Germany faced Brazil in the final but lost on 2 goals, undone by Brazilian striker Ronaldo, who also won the Golden Boot.
All right, well, we're approaching the end with part 5 of 5, but we have 2006 to 2014 to cover. So Germany hosted in 2006, and they won all group stage games over Costa Rica, Poland, and Ecuador. Germany scored 2 early goals against Sweden in the round of 16, a red card to Sweden at 35, making any chance of a comeback unlikely. Argentina scored at 59 and gave Germany a good scare until Germany equalized at 80. Germany won yet another penalty shootout to advance from that game, a scuffle breaking out at the end, just as in the final that Connor mentioned earlier. After a scoreless goal with Italy in regular time, Germany seemed happy to rely on their strong penalty shootout record to decide the matter, but Italy took them by surprise, scoring at 119 in extra time, just a minute before it went to penalties. And then to add insult to injury, they scored at 120 plus 1 to send Germany to a third place match, though they comfortably won that over Portugal. In 2010, wins over Australia and Ghana sandwiched a loss to Serbia. We should keep an eye on that, Connor, because they often win their first and third and don't do as well in their second, which would be Spain in this cup. Anyway, it was enough to finish top of the group, and they faced England in the round of 16. Connor mentioned that weird echo of the 1966 World Cup final. It kind of occurred again when an English shot at 29 minutes in hit the crossbar and clearly bounced beyond the line. But kind of inverse of 1966, this one wasn't awarded. It would have made the score 2-2 and perhaps brought England back into the game. However, Germany went on to win 4-1 and thrashed another traditional rival, beating Argentina 4-0. In the semi-finals, though, they lost on a single goal to Spain, whose dynasty team dominated actually more than the scoreline showed. So Germany, again in the third place match, took third place, scoring the winner at 82 over Uruguay. 2014 was again that famous win-tie-win pattern. They beat Portugal and USA in games 1 and 3, but tied Ghana in the middle. They nevertheless passed the group stage, and in the round of 16, Algeria looked to exact revenge for the 1986 debacle that we talked about, Germany colluding with Austria to knock Algeria out. And Algeria did well after a goalless draw in regular time. 3 goals were scored in extra time, but Germany came out the winner. A 1-0 win over France saw them facing host Brazil in the semi-final. And as we've touched on, in one of the most shocking events in World Cup history, Germany scored 5 goals by 29 minutes, 4 of them coming in a 6 minutes period. And Germany went on to win 7-1 over hosts Brazil. They faced Argentina once again in the final, which went scoreless in regular time. And Mario Götze got the glorious winner in extra time, actually considered one of the best World Cup final goals there for their 4th title. Have you seen that goal, Connor?
Yeah, I remember it. He took it off the chest and volleyed it in.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, that was their 3rd meeting with Argentina in a World Cup final.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, well, we'll see how they did in 2018. I think I kind of gave it away earlier. But take it away, Connor.
So Germany had a perfect qualifying performance in a group with no real second-tier team, but a few tricky third-tier ones in Czech Republic, Northern Ireland, Norway, and a well-performing Azerbaijan. They won all 10 qualifying games, averaging 4.3 goals per game.
Wow.
So that was a good omen going into the World Cup. But it was a poor start. They lost their opening game to Mexico and actually played poorly. They struggled against Sweden and despite a red card, scored a late winner to save themselves. However, their tournament ended in disgrace, losing to South Korea on 2 injury time goals, and they finished last in the group, a terrible defense of their title.
Good Lord.
And I should say in that South Korea game, a tie would have done Germany no good, so they were pushing for a winner. But still, for South Korea to come out with a 2-0 victory, yeah, it was pretty amazing. I remember South Korea's goalie just having the game of his life that game.
Yeah, they were dominant in that game for sure, and they just couldn't break through. So they've had some interesting games with South Korea, and Asia is getting better, so it'll be interesting to see how they do against Japan in this cup. But I'm jumping the gun a bit there. Let's take a look at World Cup 2022 qualifying.
So apart from a shocking loss at home to North Macedonia, Germany won all their other games and finished comfortably first place in the qualifying group, ahead of North Macedonia, actually, but Germany finishing with 9 wins and just 1 loss from their 10 games. So strong form, as you'd expect.
Yeah, just that one game is a bit rattling, especially at home. Okay, well, we'll take an overview of the Euro Cup history here, which is actually a little less successful than the World Cup history. Actually, they started weekly in European competition, and their record is not as stellar. They didn't enter the first 2 cups and then didn't qualify on their first entry in 1968, the only time they've ever failed to qualify for a cup. Unlike the World Cup, the Euro Cup wins are clustered into one 24-year period. That's 1972, 1980, and 1996. And they earned 2 second-place finishes in that period, punctuated by a group stage finish in 1984. They failed to reach the final round 2 other times in 2000 and 2004, immediately following their weakest period in the World Cup there. By their high standards, the new millennium is something of a drought, reaching the final only once in 2008, where they finished second. They did, however, reach the semi-finals in both 2012 and 2016, upholding their reputation as at least a regional powerhouse. And let's take that into 2020 and see how they did.
So yeah, beginning with qualifying, Germany kind of returned to form after their ghastly World Cup exit, winning all games except for a loss at home to second place Netherlands to finish first in their qualifying group. Northern Ireland, Belarus, and Estonia were the other teams. In the tournament, Germany hosted their group stage games. This tournament, of course, played in various locations across Europe, but lost to France and tied Hungary. Although a convincing win in their second game over Portugal gave them enough to finish second in the group stage. That was a very tough and competitive group, actually.
Yeah, literally a group of death.
Yeah, France, Germany, Portugal, Hungary.
Or maybe not so much, because there is a third place. There is a third place passage there.
Yeah, so 3 teams went through, but Germany's second place finish in the group stage paired them with England in the round of 16. And they lost that game 2-0 at Wembley.
All right. Well, not a great performance there by Germany. And once again, we see that kind of different performance in game 2 compared to the other 2 games. It seems like games 1 and 3 are weak when they don't do well in the tournament and strong when they do well. All right, well, we'll finish up with Germany by taking a look at their recent games. They've had a couple of friendlies and then UEFA Nations League 2022-23. Take it away, Connor.
Yeah, 2 friendlies in May included a win over Israel and a draw in Netherlands. In their Nations League A, they actually started with 3 draws, tying in Italy, home to England, and then in Hungary. Though they did win their most recent game over Italy 5-2. That's also quite a competitive group, with Hungary performing very well. And yeah, Germany will have games against Hungary and England still to come.
Yeah, well, a bit of an ambivalent performance there. Where are they in the group? They're still in second place, so have a good chance still. Interestingly, Hungary is on top of that group, which includes Germany, Italy, and England.
Wow.
Kind of an interesting group there. All right, well, finally, we take a look at their World Cup schedule.
Yeah, so perhaps more significant for Germany, given some of the patterns we've described. They play Japan first, Spain second, and Costa Rica third.
Well, they'll be open for the at least the win in games 1 and 3 there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go on to talk about Japan, beginning with participation and achievements. So they are an unusual team that parallels the USA in several ways. Both of them have a long history, but that's not widely recognized. And both were weak and fairly anonymous until the 1990s, at which time they both became a power in their respective regions and showed some form on the World Cup, on the world stage. Um, go ahead with their achievements, Connor.
Sure. So, in terms of achievements, Japan were virtually a non entity in world football until first successfully qualifying for the Asian Cup in 1988. Perhaps it began in 1986 with their first World Cup qualification that was truly competitive. Uh, there, they reached the final round of qualifying for the first time, but were no match for South Korea, who won both legs. So, just to make it clear, they didn't qualify for 1986, but were competitive. It took until 1998 to successfully qualify for the World Cup, but then they did so every time after, and their best finish is a round of 16, which they've reached three times, or in half their cup since 1998. Their success in the Asian Cup predates that. After their first successful qualification in 1988, they won in 1992 and actually went on to win four of the six cups until 2011.
Wow, so pretty successful there. Okay, well, I realized I skipped just a part of their history, so I'll just go back and cover. Their first international game was in 1917, and they actually entered the 1938 World Cup, but they withdrew. Then they were banned in 1950 because of their role in the war, and they were spotty in qualification until 1970. So they failed to enter two and they didn't qualify for two. But from 1970 onwards, they participated consistently. Despite the success that you mentioned in the Asian Cup, they actually missed uh, six of the first eight cups. So they only participated consistently from 1988, after which they had fairly successful periods. But even the two that they qualified for in the early years, 1968 and 1976, I should say, not qualified for, but the only two cups they enter, they failed to qualify for. So fairly spotty history up until let's say 1990. Okay, well, let's get back on track here with a look at their World Cup history, beginning with an overview. So, their early World Cup history bears little mention. As I said, they either didn't enter or were knocked out quickly. And when they were knocked out, it was usually at the hands of South Korea. And if not, it was then North Korea. They showed strength from 1986, reaching the final knockout round, and 1994 was the first time they reached a final round group. They fell just short there in the excellently titled "The Agony of Doha." Doha is a city in Qatar, where they fell just short in 1994, but they reached the World Cup in 1998 and every time thereafter. Reaching the round of 16 in 2002 was put down to the hosting advantage, but doing so again in 2010 was a sign of improvement, though it wasn't maintained in 2014. Later, we'll see whether they were able to repeat that in 2018. But before Connor tells us about that, we will take a look at the World Cup finals in detail here. And reaching the cup in 1998 was an achievement in their region, with the region being fairly weak. And they were not expected to do well. They did well in terms of respectable results, all games ending in just one goal margins, but unfortunately they lost them all. It was 0-1 with Argentina and Croatia, and a 1-2 loss to Jamaica. 2002 saw them hosting half the tournament. South Korea hosted the other half, and the two constantly compared themselves. Both played beyond themselves, as it turned out. Japan tying Belgium 2-2 in their opener, beating Russia 1-0, and then beating Tunisia. A better group stage result than South Korea, even if it was less dramatic. Japan went on to lose to Turkey on a single goal in the round of 16. They seemed satisfied enough with that, at least until later that day when South Korea won their game over Italy and ultimately reached the semi-finals. It was fair enough, though, South Korea having a far more successful soccer history than Japan. Do you want to take us through 2006 and 10, Connor?
Sure. So 2006, saw both South Korea and Japan knocked out at the group stage. Though these countries never stop comparing their success, I guess we'll focus only on Japan from here, except to say that the World Cup history after 2002 have been quite similar. In 2006, Japan went 1-0 up on Australia in their opener with a controversial goal. The score looked like it would end that way despite mounting pressure from Australia. However, Australia scored 3 goals at the end to make it seem less close than it was. It was a 0-0 draw with Croatia in the second match. And in the third, despite Brazilian magic, Japan looked to go into halftime with a 1-0 lead on a lovely goal. However, superstar Ronaldinho scored in first half injury time.
Not Ronaldinho, but Ronaldo.
Right, Ronaldo. Brazil's flair showed true results with 3 goals in the second half. But despite that scoreline, Japan's goalie played an excellent game, but they didn't end up going out. 2010 started with a 1-0 win over Cameroon, but they lost to Netherlands by the same score in Game 2. They earned something of reputation as free kick specialists with 2 goals scored that way in Game 3's 3-1 win over Denmark. That second place group stage finish took them to the round of 16, where in a dull affair they tied Paraguay 1-1. It went to penalties, and Japan hit the crossbar on their third shot, while Paraguay scored all of theirs.
Ooh, that was close. All right, well, 2014 in Brazil started with a 1-2 loss to Ivory Coast. It was a goalless draw with Greece in the second game, Japan doing well to earn that result after having earned a red card at 38. But the third game was a 1-4 loss at the hands of Colombia, and that saw them finish last in the group stage. So let's take a look at 2018, which they also qualified for, and Connor will show us how they did that too.
Yeah, so in qualification, Japan entered in round 2. That was a group stage, and they began with a home tie against Singapore. However, they won all remaining games, including 2 big wins over Syria, who later reached the AFC playoff, and Japan comfortably finished first. They started the round 3 group stage poorly also, losing to UAE at home, but recovered there as well, losing again only to Saudi Arabia in the final game, though they finished in first place above them. They otherwise only suffered away ties in Australia and Iraq.
Right, a pretty competitive group there with 3 of them finishing just a point apart, hey?
Very, yeah. Japan finished first with 20 points, and Saudi Arabia and Australia with 19 each. But Japan took their form into the World Cup and got off to a great start, beating Colombia, who gifted them an advantage with an early red card and penalty, which Japan scored. They tied Senegal in the second and followed a peculiar strategy in their third match against Poland, seemingly leaving tense matters to fate by fielding a weakened team and playing poorly. Luck was with them as they lost the game, but took second place in the group stage over Senegal, with whom they had an identical record throughout, but advanced by having fewer yellow cards.
I think that was the decider was on a fair play award, right?
That's right. Yeah, Japan and Senegal had a 1-1-1 record, 4 goals scored, 4 against, and they had tied each other. So really nothing to separate them.
Mm-hmm.
They then had a thrilling round of 16 game against Belgium, which saw them go two goals up after halftime, and admirably continued their attack. This perhaps proved a mistake, though when on the last kick of the game, their offensive-minded corner offered up a counterattack for Belgium to swoop downfield and score a heartbreaking winner.
Oh.
So it was kind of a quirky tournament for Japan, but a round of 16 exit in a very close game with Belgium proved a good result.
Yeah, a very exciting game, that one. All right, well, that was 2018, and we'll take a look at their 2022 qualifying record.
So they once again entered in the round 2 of 3 group stage. This was made easy by a lack of a true pot 2 team, and they finished first in the round in their group stage, winning all 8 games. After that, in the 6-team group stage that followed, they lost to Oman at home in their opening game, and were in fourth place after 4 games thanks to a loss in Saudi Arabia. But consistency after that saw them claw their way back to the top going into the last game. But they squandered it with a home tie to bottom finishers Vietnam. And they finished second of 6 in the final round behind Saudi Arabia. But luckily for them, they were ahead of Australia, who they beat twice, and that was still good enough for automatic qualification to this cup.
All right. Well, that was funny, but part of the reason I was laughing is because South Korea did exactly the same thing in the other group there.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the Asian Cup history. This will just be an overview, and the 2000 and hang on, where am I?
Yeah. Do you want me to pick it up?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm a bit lost in my. Yeah.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, Japan arrived on the Asian Cup scene in 1988, having entered only twice previously in 1968 and 76, failing to qualify both times. They proved weak in that cup, and one would not have guessed or predicted their success in the following cup, even though they were hosting. But they won in 1992 and won roughly every second cup thereafter. To sweeten that record, South Korea had not won since the first and second editions, the latter in 1960. 2015 was a step down, losing in the quarterfinals for their worst finish since 1966. And now I'll take us through 2019, but beginning with qualifying. So 2018 World Cup qualifying actually made up the first 2 rounds of qualification. So their first place finish in round 2 qualified them automatically for this cup. Despite Japan reaching the final of the Asian Cup, it was a performance that was only sometimes good. They struggled with Turkmenistan in their opener and should not have won over Oman. They both got an undue penalty and got away with one that should have been given against them. Their B team beat Uzbekistan, and they took first place in the group stage.
Yeah, they really seem to struggle with Oman.
Yeah. Japan played a defensive, almost Catenaccio style against Saudi Arabia, but won 1-0, and went on to beat Vietnam and then Iran in the semis. This game against Iran, a 3-0 win, was really their only truly impressive performance. They met Qatar in the final. Qatar were a real surprise package, but were well deserving and won that game 3-1.
Right. Okay. And yeah, they haven't played an Asian Cup for a while, but they will be doing. I believe it's next summer. So we'll be previewing that one. Let's move on to their recent and upcoming games, though. They played a bunch of friendlies. They also hosted a kind of a friendly tournament called the Kirin Cup in the summertime. And although I'm not sure it was their A team, they played in the East Asian Games, basically, East Asian Football Federation Cup, that the Asians tend to take seriously, or they used to. Now I'm not sure if they send their top teams to that cup. But anyway, take it away.
Yeah, so Japan had a string of friendlies, including the ones you mentioned, from March 2021 of this year onwards, mostly at home. I maybe won't go through all the results, but they did beat South Korea 3-0 in a friendly, which is always a significant game.
Yeah.
They lost narrowly at home to Brazil, 1-0, and then those 2 Kirin Cup matches were actually a draw against Ghana and a 0-3 loss against Tunisia. And then those East Asian Cup games included a 6-0 win over Hong Kong, a draw with China, and another 3-0 win over South Korea.
Wow. Well, that was good. Wow, that's a good result for Tunisia, winning 3-0 over Japan in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, what does their World Cup schedule look like?
Japan begins with the game against Germany. They meet Costa Rica in their second match, and then they finish up with Spain.
All right. Well, speaking of Costa Rica, let's move on to them, the fourth team in our group here, and we'll begin with an overview of their participation and achievements. So, Costa Rica is a far more senior team than most realize, having first entered the World Cup in 1938. They withdrew, and their entry was not accepted in 1954, so they began competing for the World Cup in 1958 and have participated regularly ever since. They competed for their first regional competition in 1963 and participated consistently, except for one withdrawal in 1967.
Yeah, as a small country, currently around 5 million people, they have a pretty impressive record. They first reached the World Cup in 1990, and from 2002, they have been regular qualifiers with the exception of 2010. 2014 is their best result, a quarterfinal finish. In regional play, they won the CONCACAF Championship in its first edition in 1963 and have three titles in all. Their last was in 1989, the last competition before it became the Gold Cup. Second place in 2002 is their best result in the newer competition.
All right, well, let's move on to their World Cup overview. And it took a long time to reach the World Cup, despite the relatively easy passage the region affords, even Mexico sometimes faltering to make room for others. They came close in their first three entries from 1958 to 1966, but then not really close again until 1990, their regional strength roughly paralleling that. They finally made it in 1990 and got past the group stage for their second best finish in the tournament. It, together with their last regional title in 1989, seemed a peak year. However, they didn't qualify for the next two. From 2002, however, they began qualifying regularly and, in World Cup qualification at least, seemed the third or fourth strongest team in the region. This faltered when they missed the Cup in 2010, but 2014 not only saw their return, but their best World Cup result ever, reaching the quarterfinals. And we will take a look at that impressive performance in our deep dive into the World Cup finals. So their qualification in 1990 can be seen as a stroke of luck at the expense of Mexico, who were disqualified. They took one of the two spots allotted to the region, but they did qualify ahead of USA, who took the second spot. They also proved their worth in the Cup, which started with a 1-0 win over Scotland. They lost by the same margin to Brazil, which is a competitive scoreline. Then they secured their passage with a 3-2 win over Sweden, coming from behind with goals at 75 and 88. Second place in the group stage brought them to the round of 16 in their first entry. Down on a goal to Czechoslovakia at 12, they tied it up at 55. However, Thomas Sukravi scored his second goal of an eventual hat-trick, and Costa Rica lost 1-4. Do you want to do the next couple of cups, Connor?
Sure. So I'll go pick it up with 1998. That saw the advent of the familiar hex in CONCACAF, the final round consisting of 6 teams playing each other twice, with 3 automatically qualifying for the Cup. They finished 4th that year, but impressed in 2002, finishing first fully 6 points ahead of Mexico and the United States.
Wow.
In the Cup, they opened with a 2-0 win over China, and in Game 2, scored at 86 minutes against Turkey to draw. They predictably lost to Brazil in the third game, though by the unlikely score of 2-5, and they finished tied for second with Turkey on points, but behind on goal difference. Turkey went on to finish third in that tournament, but Costa Rica had fallen just short at the group stage. 2006 began with an exciting game in the tournament opener against host Germany. Forward Paulo Wanchop terrorized the German defense, scoring 2 goals, but the Germans proved too powerful, and it ended with a 2-4 loss. A 0-3 loss to Ecuador in the second game was followed by a 1-2 loss to Poland, and so Costa Rica went out.
Yeah, losing all 3 games there. 2010 saw them fall short of the Cup, losing an intercontinental playoff to Uruguay, who they found themselves grouped with in the following Cup in 2014, a true group of death, which included England, Uruguay, and Italy. But far from being the goats that everyone expected, they won their first two games, coming back from 0-1 down at halftime to win 3-1 over Uruguay, and then beating Italy 1-0. Incredibly, they not only went undefeated in the group with a scoreless tie against England in the last game, but they won the group, knocking out the two European teams. They faced Greece in the round of 16, and despite taking a red card at 66, they still seemed set to win on their single goal until Greece scored an injury time equaliser. The matter went to penalties, where goalkeeper Keylor Navas made the key save to put them through to the quarterfinals. I think this was the performance that got goalkeeper Neil Cavas a contract at Real Madrid. Is that right, Connor?
Yeah, he was fabulous.
Mm-hmm. There in the quarterfinals, they met Netherlands, and the game went scoreless and to penalties. They lost the shootout, but the country was nevertheless delighted with their result in that tournament.
Yeah, Costa Rica treated like heroes upon their return, and they played so well in that game against Netherlands. I think really the world was pulling for them because it was such a Cinderella story. They were totally written off, and to win that group and get to the quarterfinals was amazing. And yeah, it came as close as penalties to the semifinal of the World Cup. Incredible.
It was a bit more thrilling for me because I was actually teaching a summer class, and I had a Costa Rican boy in the class, so it was a lot of fun to talk to him about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Kind of ironic too, just as a note, that we've talked about Mexico hitting a ceiling at the round of 16 at the World Cup, and yet little Costa Rica went all the way to the quarterfinals. Kind of ironic.
Better than Mexico has ever done, apart from when they hosted. That's funny. Okay, let's move on to the World Cup and see if, hardly able to keep up to that level, but let's see how they did.
Yeah, so starting with qualifying, Costa Rica for 2018 were one of the top 6 ranked teams to receive a bye straight through to the round 4 or 5 group stage. This they passed easily, suffering only an away tie in Jamaica, but beating Panama and Haiti twice. They were actually bested by Panama in the final round, the Hex, and didn't perform so well, tying Honduras twice. However, all that is overshadowed by beating the United States twice and being the biggest contributor to knocking the U.S. out of the competition.
Wow.
Otherwise, they also beat Trinidad and Tobago twice and tied Mexico once, losing their other. So it was really an up and down qualification, but in the end, they finished second and qualified automatically.
Right.
At the World Cup, Costa Rica lost their tournament opener to Serbia and then were out with a loss to Brazil. Though that game proved competitive, they frustrated Brazil, who required 2 injury time goals to win. Costa Rica also played well in their final game, a draw with Switzerland, though they finished last in the group stage.
All right. Well, they have made it to this World Cup. That's why we're talking about them, but let's see how they did it.
So they were one of 5 teams to questionably receive a bye to the final round in qualification, the Hex. That system was blatantly unfair before before COVID caused changes to improve it somewhat. And that solution was basically to expand it to an 8-team group, but Costa Rica kept their automatic place. They had a qualification of 2 halves. They looked quite weak early on, losing to the top 3 team and managing only draws with the weaker ones. In truth, the home and away factor made it seem worse than it was. They played many of their early games on the road, but they were in 5th, 5 points behind Panama at the halfway point.
I must jump in and say the nadir of their performance was in Canada in the cold of Edmonton.
Yeah, freezing conditions played in Edmonton, sub-zero. Costa Rica actually only lost that game 1-0, but we were there, and the that really didn't reflect the play. Costa Rica actually just seemed content to sit in their own half and not do much. Canada could have won by much more.
That's right, but they really surprised in the second half of the qualification, which was immediately after that game.
Yeah, after that game in that Canada, they suffered only an away draw in Mexico, and won all their other games. That was 6 other games out of 7, and ended not only well ahead of Panama, but tied with the USA in third. And had head-to-head games being the tie-breaking criteria, it would have been third in automatic qualification.
Wow, I don't think USA knows how close they came there.
Yeah, frightfully close for the USA, especially given their embarrassment of not qualifying in 2018.
Right, it would have been devastating for them if they were sent to a playoff.
Absolutely. As it was, Costa Rica finished 4th of 8 in the final group. That sent them to an intercontinental playoff, where in a controversial game in which New Zealand dominated, they won by dint of a goal scored at 3 minutes. There was only one game played. It wasn't a home and away. It was played in a neutral location of Qatar. So that victory brought Costa Rica directly to the World Cup.
Yeah, did you see the highlights of that game?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, pretty good one to watch. Who's the guy on New Zealand? Wood.
Chris Wood, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Wood, very good in that game. Anyway, let us move on to their regional cup overview. And this time I haven't lost my place, so I can do it, Connor.
Go for it.
All right. Well, a charter member in the regional competition, they've won it 3 times. They won the first edition in 1963. It was, by the way, called the CONCACAF Championship in this period. And in 1969, they repeated. That was a strong period where they finished in the top 3 in 4 of the first 5 editions. And the 5th was a withdrawal in 1967. Their weak period was very weak, though, failing to even qualify from 1973 to 1981. But they regained strength here, actually sooner than in the World Cup, by coming in the top 4 from 1985 to 1993 and winning their 3rd title in 1989. After a weak spell in the late 90s, which tracks with their World Cup record, they have passed the group stage every time since 2000 in a tournament that from 1991 was called the Gold Cup. And they reached a high point with the 2nd place finish in 2002. In recent years, they've reached the semifinals twice in 2009 and 2017. Given their World Cup consistency, reaching only the quarterfinals in 7 of the last 9 editions has to be considered an underperformance, especially in 2015, where their follow-up to their incredible World Cup success was only a quarterfinal finish here.
Yeah, I'm a bit baffled by Costa Rica. I mean, to get to the World Cup, which they consistently have done since the millennium, you have to finish in the top 3 or 4, yet they can't seem to reach the final 4 in their own tournament. So they do well to reach the group stage, but it's kind of really backwards.
Yeah, it's odd for sure. All right, well, let's see if they did reach the final 4 in the 2 most recent cups, beginning with 2019.
Yeah, so 2019, Costa Rica beat Nicaragua and Bermuda to ensure advancement. So they actually fielded a partial B team, which lost to a surprisingly strong Haiti. So this turned out to be kind of a fatal mistake, as they met eventual winners Mexico in the quarterfinal and lost in penalties. I might have said, sorry, it was qualification for the Gold Cup. I was actually referring to the group stage.
Right, and Haiti took 1st place and Costa Rica was in 2nd, which is what paired them with Mexico.
Yeah, Haiti had a very good tournament that year.
I know, they knocked Canada out. Stop talking about it.
All right, we'll move on.
Okay, Gold Cup 2021.
So Gold Cup 2021 was actually the first time qualification was used through the Nations League play. Costa Rica beat Curacao away, but otherwise tied all their games. though it proved enough to finish atop and qualify them for the Cup ahead of Curacao and Haiti again. They were not as convincing at the tournament as the 3 wins in the group stage over Guadeloupe, Suriname, and Jamaica showed. They were often flat in the first half, but scored in the third quarter of the game. And Suriname almost earned a tie on a late strike which hit the post. That flatness showed in the quarterfinals when they met Canada, who dominated them as much as the 2-0 scoreline reflects. So yet again, a quarterfinal exit for Costa Rica.
Yeah, they kind of made it tough for themselves, deciding on a new manager shortly before the tournament there. Okay, well, they've also started qualification for the 2023 Gold Cup. Just a couple of games there. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, so the qualification is through the Nations League. They actually began with a 2-0 loss in Panama, but recovered to beat Martinique 2-0. Both those games were in June of this year.
Right, so just qualification underway. They should have no problem reaching the Cup. And those 2 games actually make up 2 of only 3 recent games they've had. They had a friendly in August 2021. Part of the reason with that, reason for that was that they had to play that qualifier with New Zealand. So basically, World Cup qualification went till June.
Yeah.
So that was a 0-0 draw in El Salvador, and they don't have any games scheduled, upcoming games scheduled, and I think I've been failing to mention that throughout the podcast, but most teams don't really have games scheduled other than something like the Nations League, the Euro Nations League. But I see that teams are kind of starting to put together a few games before the World Cup now. So in our update podcast, we'll probably cover those friendlies leading up to the World Cup. But let's talk about their World Cup schedule here.
So Costa Rica opened with Spain, played Japan in their second game, and then played Germany in their third.
Well, that brings us to the end of the long part 2 section, the history section. So part 3, we're going to begin by giving a reminder of their history, a summary of their history, and then their recent form for each team, and then that'll lead us into more and more analysis about their prospects for the Cup. So let's begin with Spain, a summary of Spain. The dynasty, along with the tiki-taka style of passing the ball around in the midfield, which I must say drove my mother crazy, was a very impressive period, but it came crashing down in the 2014 World Cup with a shocking 1-5 loss to Netherlands in their opener and an exit at the group stage. Perhaps it had been foreshadowed by a humiliating 0-3 loss to Brazil in the final of the 2013 Confederations Cup. The worry was that it would turn out to be a flash in the pan, as their 4th place finish was in the 1950 World Cup, and their 1964 Euro Cup title was in 1964, and their 2nd place Euro Cup finish had been too. All of those successes followed by non-qualifications, or at best by a group stage exit. Or perhaps they would return to the ambivalent history of the past, where the quarterfinals seemed their ceiling, or the deeper past of the pre-1980, where even reaching the World Cup was a challenge for Spain.
Yeah, the direction had proved to be a slow recovery. Still a strong team, even though round of 16 finishes in Euro 2016 and the World Cup 2018 were a bit disappointing. The semi-final finish in Euro 2020 matched their talent more suitably, and they go into the 2022 World Cup with renewed hope, looking strong in qualifying and in Euro Nations League games, although not without the odd shudder.
That's right. Okay, let's take a look at Germany. Germany is the most consistent team in world soccer. Brazil, the only comparable team. They were not part of the World Cups in 1930 and 1950, but have reached the World Cup every time they have entered. The only time they failed at the group stage was in 1938 and recently in 2018. They've reached the final 8 times and won half of them with this, doing this 3 times in a row from 1982 to 1990 and 3 out of 4 times between 2002 and 2014. Eurocup is similar but slightly less consistent, with 1 failure to qualify and 3 group stage knockouts. They have reached the final 6 times, again winning half of them. However, only 1 of these has been in this millennium, a second place finish in 2008. They have still passed the last 4 group stages and reached the semi-finals twice in 2012 and 2016, so they remain a consistent contender near the top.
From that summary, we can see why failing to pass the group stage in 2018 was such a shock. Current form comes down to how well they recovered from that shock. Their history suggests it was an errant result, not likely to happen again. But it is possible it will be a lull, like the 2 World Cup quarterfinal finishes in a row from 1994 to 98, or 2 group stage finishes in a row in the Euro Cup from 2000 and 2004. Even there, they cannot really be considered lulls since they won the opposite cup in the middle of each of those. But the round of 16 finish in the 2020 Euro Cup makes it as close as they've ever been, or as they've been, to a lull across both cups. 1 or 2 more competitions are needed to draw a conclusion on that, but we can follow his progress through the 2022-23 Nations League. There they sit after 4 games in second behind Hungary, but ahead of Italy and England. They have 1 win and 3 draws, so perhaps they're not back to the dominant form they would hope for.
All right, well, moving on to Japan. After being a non-entity, don't have the graphics in the right place here on the YouTube version. Sorry about that, YouTube people, but it doesn't matter much. Japan, after being a non-entity for most of the last century, stormed onto the Asian Cup stage in 1992 and the World Cup stage in 2002. They have since proven the strongest team in Asia, at least in terms of Asian Cup play. South Korea still dominates the local level, and it's an interesting debate as to who, between the 2 great rivals, has impressed most on the world stage, though there are other candidates in the region in that argument. However, Japan and all strong teams are being challenged by smaller, improving teams, most visibly Qatar, who won the 2019 Asian Cup. The first time since 1992 where Japan went 2 cups in a row without a title. More subtly, though, they and other strong teams are dropping a few more points in their campaigns to lesser teams, whether that means those teams are improving or they are becoming less consistent. On the whole, though, the region is becoming more competitive on the world stage.
Yeah, reaching beyond the group stage of the 2002 World Cup was put down to the advantage of hosting. So doing so again in 2010 showed improvement, and that South Korea also did so showed improvement for the region, as you mentioned. A third time in 2018 legitimizes them as a respectable force at the group stage level, and the general competitiveness of Asian teams in 2018. South Korea once again stealing Japan's thunder by knocking out Germany, argues that the region is catching up to the strength of other regions. As you said, the weaker teams are earning more points against Japan, and the big team is less a sign of inconsistency, more a sign that the lesser teams are improving, and Qatar leading the way there. But Japan lead the way as far as Asian strength is viewed on the world stage. It jumped forward when the World Cup was in Asia in 2020 or in 2002, and it will be interesting to see the west side of the region as hosts in 2022.
All right, and finally, a summary and form of Costa Rica. So I'll do the summary and Connor does the form. Costa Rica are currently the strongest team in Central America, though that was not always the case. Honduras and El Salvador have had their turns at the World Cup, and Panama has recently become a force in the region. The wider region includes Mexico, USA, Canada, and the Caribbean teams, amongst whom Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago sometimes challenge. Costa Rica was a strong force in the region, winning 3 CONCACAF championships from 1963 to 1989, but did not reach the World Cup during that time, with a lull in both competitions in the 70s and early 80s. Mexico and USA usually take 2 of the 4 World Cup spots available, and from 1990, especially from 2002, they have usually taken 1 of the 2 remaining for the rest of the region. That puts them as the 3rd or 4th strongest team in the region, but that hasn't played out in the regional cups, where they reached the semi-finals, effectively the top 4, only twice since 2005, though they do consistently finish in the top 8.
Costa Rica continued to rely on the successful World Cup 2014 squad, but the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cup suggested they are aging out and not being replaced. In 2002 World Cup qualifying, it looked as if Panama would take their World Cup spot, but a strong finish saw Costa Rica seize it back. A bit of renewal occurred, but it was really a spurt of form from the veterans. Clearly, more renewal will be necessary going forward, but they have consistently produced teams strong enough to reach the World Cup over the past 20 years. So they may come through the imminent retirement of that 2014 squad.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that a bit more later, but we're going to move on to the rankings of each team. Go ahead, Connor.
So we'll begin with Spain, the Pot 1 team. So Spain ranks 6th in the FIFA rankings and 3rd in ELO. They actually typically track a little bit higher in their ELO ranking, which tends to take a bit more of a longer historical perspective.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, they were first for a long time in that period from 2008 to 2012. The lowest they've been in FIFA is 11th. But as you say, in ELO rankings, they've never gone below 10.
Yeah, amazing. Germany are currently 11th in FIFA rankings and 8th in ELO. They've actually been outside the top 10 since December 2018, which was a fall from first place. And Germany were actually 1st or 2nd for a long time, kind of from December 2012 onwards. So I guess based on the rankings, you would say that kind of reflects a bit of the lull that we've talked about.
Yeah, they've got to be quite annoyed that they're a second pot team here, and I think they'll be working hard to do something about that. As you say, they've been 1st or 2nd, or at least in the top 5 for most of their career. Interestingly, before the World Cup in 2006, which they hosted, they had to do a big rebuilding phase. They were very nervous about that cup, and they were as low as 21st in the FIFA rankings before that tournament. Though in ELO rankings, they've really never been below 15th.
All right, moving on to Japan, the Pot 3 team. They're currently 24th in the world according to FIFA and 31st according to ELO.
Right. Well, that 24th in FIFA, I think, is a little bit high for Japan. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, it reflects, probably they're reaching the final of the most recent Asian Cup. But as we said, they didn't actually perform particularly well there, despite going all the way to the final.
Yeah, it's arguable, but I think 31st in ELO is probably more representative. And they've been kind of up and down over the years, as low as 41st in ELO rankings in June 2018. And in 2011, they were in the top 15. So bouncing around quite a bit there.
Yeah, and then finally, Costa Rica, they're the Pot 4 team. They're 34th in FIFA and 37th in ELO, so below Japan in both ranking systems. They've actually risen recently, probably because of their very good form at the end of qualifying. But as recently as December 2021, they were 49th in FIFA and 58th in ELO.
Right, so they've jumped 20 points in 20 points in ELO, but whether that really represents improvement is something we'll discuss a bit later. They were, of course, high after the 2014 World Cup. They reached about 15th in both ELO and ELO, but typically they're more around 40th in the world. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the rankings. Let's take a look at the head-to-heads. And Connor will give an overview, and then I'll talk about a couple of details as he goes.
Yeah, first with Spain, the Pot 1 team, they've actually never met Japan or Costa Rica in competitive matches. But they do have a long history with Germany, and Germany comes out ahead with 4 wins, 2 draws, and 3 losses.
Right, and Germany won most of those games in the early period where Spain wasn't that strong. But interestingly, they did meet in 2008 and 2010 when Spain was strong during their dynasty period. That's their 2 most recent meetings, and Spain won them both, though arguably they're not as strong now.
Right. Germany haven't met Japan previously. They met South Korea a number of times, as we mentioned. But Germany have met Costa Rica. That was the opening game in the 2006 World Cup. We talked about that one as well. That's their only meeting. So Germany has a one win from 1 game played. And then finally, Japan and Costa Rica have never met.
Right. Yeah, that Germany-Costa Rica game was a really good game, and Costa Rica was a bit competitive there. So hopefully they can pull off something like that this time. Let's take a look at the odds. At the beginning, Connor mentioned kind of where they are in the pots, and most of the teams kind of come from the middle of their pots. In fact, we could argue that Germany and Spain are both pot 1 teams, and Japan and Costa Rica are both pot 3 teams. So that's kind of interesting, hey?
Yeah. And the odds really reflect that. We just talked about the odds to qualify from the group. Spain are given a 90.5% chance and Germany 87% chance. Japan are a bit outsiders with just 22.5% chance. And then Costa Rica, the real outsiders, just 9.8. Though it would be interesting to look back at what their odds were, of course, in 2014 when they overturned that group. So I mean, predictably, Costa Rica have the lowest odds to advance. But I guess looking, not too far recent past, you can take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's funny. They probably had lower odds there than they have here. Okay, well, that kind of leads us into a discussion, and maybe we can begin that discussion with whether you agree with those odds. Do you think Spain is slightly favorite to Germany?
Yeah, I would probably say so now, that Spain is slightly favored. But I guess I want to ask you before we just kind of directly compare Spain and Germany. Do you see Japan or Costa Rica getting out of this group or threatening to do so?
That's a tough question. I mean, definitely there seem to be Spain and Germany in their own little league at the top, and Japan and Costa Rica battling it out for 2nd and 3rd place. However, I think we've seen enough lapses with Spain and Germany that it is possible that they could be surprised by Japan and Costa Rica. I don't see a high chance of it here, but I kind of think it's possible. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in that both Spain and Germany have group stage exits, in the last 2 cups.
Yeah.
And, they were expected to get through. I don't really see it here. Ironically, I see Germany is probably the more inconsistent team. We talked about their qualifying loss at home to North Macedonia, which is ironic because Germany is perhaps the most consistent team over the long history, but they've been inconsistent recently. So, Germany fans were hoping history doesn't repeat itself. I mean, I have to say Spain and Germany, that's where I put my money to advance.
Yeah, well, my motto, as I was writing this thing, I kind of came up with a motto with Germany in that they lapse but don't lull. And if they do kind of don't do well here, I think it would amount to a lull. But I think Germany is going to be really determined to come out of the couple of lapses that they've had. So I agree with you. They are seeming a bit more consistent than, inconsistent than Spain right now. But I kind of think that Germany is going to bounce back. They have the stronger history, and as I said, they always seem to come back whenever they do go through some trouble. So actually, I'm pipping Germany over Spain for this.
Yeah, I think Spain kind of coming down from their dynasty. They certainly haven't been written off. People view them as a strong team, but not as the invincibles that they once were. And perhaps that gives Spain a bit of an advantage. Perhaps there was a lot of pressure, especially as some of those dynasty members, Xavi, Iniesta, Puyol, as they retired. Perhaps there was a weight of expectation on a new generation. So I do think Spain are kind of finding their feet again, and I expect them to have a strong tournament here.
Yeah, one of the things I'm really interested in here is whether Japan can trouble them. We've seen that Spain and Germany have both been troubled by South Korea. Spain had a bit of trouble with Iran and Morocco. That's an African team, but I think we can throw them into this discussion. And generally, that region is becoming stronger. So I do give Japan a bit of a chance here. I was surprised that in the odds that Japan was given a 23% chance of passing the group stage, while Costa Rica was just given a 10% chance. I really thought the odds makers would view those as quite even.
Yeah, personally, I think Japan are the stronger team. They've shown it more consistently in their World Cup history. Getting through beyond the group stage about half the time. Um, and I
Yeah,
think
3 out of the last 5 times.
Yeah, it's impressive. And I think Japan has stronger players and players playing in bigger leagues. So yeah, I think Japan are a good team. I think Japan is certainly capable of taking points off, one or potentially both of Spain or Germany. I don't see it being enough to go through, but they could have a strong influence on who finishes first in the group. And
Definitely.
potentially, if a second place team ends up with a very difficult group or difficult matchup in the round of 16, Japan could have a very significant say on either Spain or Germany's tournaments and their tournament chances just by, even managing to draw a game. So, and I definitely think it's possible. I'm convinced that Japan are good enough to do that.
Yeah, I really think Spain and Germany will have to be at their best. Germany will definitely have to overcome their recent inconsistency. Otherwise, they could well be taken by surprise by Japan or even by Costa Rica. But I want to just talk a little bit about Costa Rica because, while the qualification was going on, actually the 2019 and 2021 Cup, I was like, what are they doing? Like, they're going with those veterans from 2014, which are great players. Some of them still are, but like they didn't seem to be doing anything to renew themselves. And all through the 2019-21 Gold Cups, they just looked so flat. And then through the World Cup qualification for the first half, they looked so flat. I don't know how they pulled it off. I know they had a little bit of renewal, but it really was kind of Joel Campbell got the goal in the final playoff game. It was the veterans that pulled them through. But honestly, I cannot see the veterans pulling them through this World Cup stage. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean Brian Ruiz, who was playing in the Premier League like about a decade ago, it seems. He's still around, and they rely on him to score goals, despite
Yeah, they
his.
do.
I think he's pushing 40 now, and like you said, very surprised that they didn't use two Gold Cups. They had two Gold Cups since the last World Cup to bring in young players and experiment, and I was really surprised they didn't. They were quite flat, so I see kind of Costa Rica's golden age, at least on the World Cup stage, kind of, peaking really with that 2014 surprise. Perhaps to me, the biggest surprise in qualification was that they managed to turn things around
Yeah.
because having watched them play in Canada and highlights of their other games, they were actually quite poor. And I didn't quite see them being capable of turning it around, but they went on that kind of magical run. I think they're probably happy to be here. I mean, traditionally, they've been the third strongest team behind USA and Mexico, but a very strong Canada, who won qualification, is changing that. So I think their kind of traditional spot is kind of third, you know, among the top three teams in the region. I think long term that's under threat. We may see less consistent qualification from them in the future. So yeah, I see them here as they're not coming in kind of at a peak in their history. I think they're happy to be here, and I think they're kind of unlucky. They got put in a very strong group, and I really see them perhaps being competitive with Japan, but I don't see them really taking points off the European team.
Yeah, I don't really agree with you on that one, Connor, because I really don't see any group that they would be in that they would really have a chance of second place. I mean, the African region too, like Asia, is growing a bit stronger. I'm really hoping that Africa will come to a bit of fruition in this cup. They were hoping that would happen in 2010. I'm getting a bit off topic though. I can't see any team, any teams that they would be favored over in this cup.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, it is a very difficult to try and overcome a top two of Spain and Germany, but you're right. Looking at the list of pot two teams, with the exception of the United States, perhaps, who they seem to get the better of, don't really see them advancing. They are, I think their ranking at the time of the draw 31st in FIFA. I think that was a little bit inflated. I think they're one of the smaller teams, one of the weaker teams, and I think that truth will come out in this tournament.
Yeah, I just don't think they have the squad to pull a surprise like they did in 2014. I think Japan have that capability and the players to take advantage of any cracks that Spain and Germany have in their, probably in their confidence more than in their actual squad. But not Costa Rica. But anyway, I've just seen you dodging and refusing to commit this whole time. But I'm gonna pin you down here. What is going to happen in this group?
I'm gonna go with the pots. I say Spain in first place, Germany second, Japan in third, and Costa Rica fourth.
All right. Well, I'm gonna kind of slightly alter it and call Germany in first. That's because I think they will respond to inconsistency, and but I think it'll be close between them and Spain. I really hope that Japan does surprise, but I wouldn't predict it. So I got to put Japan in third and Costa Rica in fourth. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, those who are unfamiliar with our podcast might want to keep listening for some information for further listening. But if you're turning off now, goodbye, and we'll hope you tune into our next podcast in the series.
All right, yeah, stay tuned for more information. But if you're turning off now, bye, and hope to see you in the next podcast.
Bye.
Okay, further listening. We've done 9 different series of podcasts if you're interested in a deeper dive. Some of the information may be dated, but some of the histories focus on different aspects of the team histories, so it can help you to get to know teams more intimately.
Yes, as mentioned, this is our 10th series, and we have done at least one series on every region except Oceania. We have files for that region too, and we'll do one down the road so as not to leave them out. But let's go region by region.
Right, so Europe, our first series was a group-by-group podcast on the teams of Euro 2020. That was played in the summer of 2021. And for South America, we also did a group-by-group podcast on the teams in Copa America 2021.
For North America, we have done 3 series on CONCACAF. The first was a group-by-group podcast on the teams in the 2021 Gold Cup. That included a look at Qatar. The second was a preview of the 8 teams in the final round of World Cup CONCACAF qualifying. That came with our first player series, where we went team by team through the players. The third was an update halfway through that qualification.
Yes, and for Asia, we did a group-by-group podcast on the 12 teams in the final round of World Cup qualifying, and that included a deep dive into each team's World Cup qualifying history.
We have done 3 series on African teams. The first was a group-by-group podcast on the 24 teams in the 2021 African Cup, played in early 2022. The second, done around the same time, was a team-by-team series on the players for each of those teams. Third and finally, we have recently concluded a series on almost all teams in Africa, a group-by-group examination of the 12 qualifying groups for the 2023 African Cup. This included a deep dive into their African Cup history, which was quite extensive. This provides a look into some of the lesser teams that rarely even qualify for the African Cup.
Right, and we realize that not everyone is interested in the level of detail that we go into. So starting from that series, the 2023 African Cup series, we're editing our media casts into shorter versions. Generally, for groups and teams, this will just be a summary and discussion segments of the longer podcasts. And for the player ones, just the sections on the squad's overall strength and a list of the main players that we expect to reach the competition. So that's usually 2 or 3 groups per episode.
Yes, otherwise each long version of the series contains a deep dive into the matter at hand. So if it's African Cup qualification, for example, it's a deep dive into the team's history of African Cup qualification. Or if it's the World Cup qualification, a deep dive into each team's history in qualifying for the World Cup.
Right, and all of those podcasts can be found in our library at soccerphiles.captivate.fm. That's Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And we also provide a link to our website and other relevant material in the show notes for each media cast. And in general, to find us, you can type Soccer Files Canada into Google, and it's easy to find your way from there. Or just check out the show notes for this or any of our media casts, and it'll be easy to navigate from there.
Okay, see you in our future media casts.